How should I periodize my training and how can I auto-regulate lifting weights? These are two very good questions commonly asked in the strength performance field, and there are several factors to consider when trying to answer each. So to start, an overview of this presentation is we'll cover traditional training styles, specifically looking at linear versus daily undulating periodization and talking about the differences between the two. Then we'll dive into autoregulation and how we could use rating of perceived exertion as a tool for this, and how intensity and velocity will be related to a rating of perceived exertion. And we can define periodization as structured training over a specific time period to produce a specific outcome, often in the form of size and strength adaptations. This is one way to achieve progressive overload, or simply stated, increasing the amount of stress placed on the body over time so it has to continuously adapt. And we can think of periodization as a form of stress management, or strategically orienting the stresses we place on the body so that we are well recovered from previous training sessions and can perform well in subsequent training sessions. So one way to do this is with linear periodization, or LP. And this is when we would change our sets and repetitions after several weeks or even several months. So an example 12-week training cycle would be weeks 1 through 4. We could perform 4 sets of 8 repetitions at 65% of our 1 repetition maximum 3 times per week. In weeks 5 through 8, we could perform 5 sets of 6 at 75% 1RM 3 times per week. And then weeks 9 through 12, we could perform 6 sets of 4 at 85% 1RM 3 times per week. And these percentages of 65, 75, and 85% throughout the weeks will progressively increase those percentages ever so slightly to, again, achieve progressive overload. So linear periodization, this was adapted by Stone and O'Brien in 1987, is when we would have volume over time progressively decrease, or the number of repetitions we're doing progressively increase, and intensity, or how difficult each repetition is, would progressively increase over time. And this differs greatly from daily undulating periodization, or DUP, which we would change sets and repetitions each training session. So an example 12-week training cycle, we could have Monday, we perform 4 sets of 8 repetitions at 65% 1RM. Then Wednesday, 5 sets of 6 at 75% 1RM. Fridays, we perform 6 sets of 4 at 85% 1RM. So looking back at this linear periodization model from Stone and O'Brien 1987, we see the volume factor progressively decreases over time, and with a DUP mindset, we would have this undulate in a wave-like fashion as it still decreases on the path that it is. We would do the same thing for intensity as that factor increases over time. It's been found in the literature that DUP is superior than LP for strength gains. Both Ray et al. In 2002 and Smau et al. In 2012 had a DUP group compared to an LP group for a whole training session, and when you multiplied the sets times reps times the intensities for each study, for each group in each study throughout the whole program, total training volume was equated between the two. They both found that the DUP group had significantly greater strength gains. And this is really interesting because if we can do the same amount of work but have greater adaptations or achieve our goals of size and strength adaptations more efficiently, of course we should choose that option in a DUP model. And the remaining 4 studies listed in one fashion or another showed DUP superiority over LP in strength and or size adaptations. Now, these are the traditional loads and reps guidelines. And what we can see here is for hypertrophy or size gains, it's generally advised to do 67 to 85% of your 1RM for 6 to 12 repetitions. For strength, greater than 85% of your 1RM for less than 6 repetitions is generally advised. Now, these are good guidelines for basic programming methodologies. However, what we know now is that following these to a T might not always be the best for every type of athlete. And these guidelines have been rather shattered by Klemp et al. In 2016. And in this protocol, they had 2 daily undulating periodization groups. One was a high repetition group, and they performed sets of 12 on Monday, sets of 10 on Wednesday, and sets of 8 on Fridays. And then a low repetition group that performed sets of 6 on Monday, sets of 4 on Wednesday, and sets of 2 on Fridays. And the high repetition group used lighter intensity, lower repetition group used heavier intensities. And when you multiplied their total training volume out between the two, that was equated between the two groups. So sets times reps times intensities was the same despite doing high repetitions and low repetitions. And what the investigators originally thought was the high repetition group would have greater hypertrophy adaptations and the low repetition group would have greater strength adaptations because these are what the traditional reps load and rep guidelines would have us believe. However, Klemp et al. Found that there were no differences between the two groups in strength adaptations or hypertrophy adaptations. And this is pretty important because this leads us to believe that it's not necessarily doing specific sets and reps that lets you get bigger or stronger, but rather just total training volume is the biggest factor driving strength and size adaptation. Now, some of the limitations of traditional periodization are that it's not individualized, and this is because adaptation and recovery are athlete specific. So one way we could try to account for this is by utilizing an auto-regulated model or one that takes athlete feedback into consideration and can adjust training loads based on that. One way to do this is by utilizing the resistance exercise specific rating of perceived exertion based on repetitions in reserve scale, or RPE based on RIR. And a higher RPE rating corresponds to fewer repetitions in reserve, and a lower RPE rating corresponds to a perceived higher amount of repetitions in reserve. And utilization of this scale is found to be limited by inaccurate ratings from novices by both Zordos et al. In 2016 and Ormsby and Carzoli et al. In 2017. Zordos et al. Had experience in novice squatters perform 1RMs in the back squat and single repetition sets at 60, 75, and 90%, as well as an 8 repetition set at 70% 1RM, and they had subjects rate RPs for each set. And they found that experienced squatters produced higher or more accurate RPs at 1RM than novices, and that experienced squatters produced slower velocities at 1RM and 90% compared to novices. And Ormsby and Carzoli et al. In 2017 utilized the same protocol, but in the bench press exercise. They found that experienced benchers produced higher or more accurate RPs at 1RM and slower velocities at 1RM only. And Helms et al. In 2016 had powerlifters perform single repetitions in the squat, bench press, and deadlift at 1RM and greater than or equal to 80% of 1RM. And all of these studies found strong correlations between RPE and intensity and strong inverse correlations between RPE and velocity. This makes sense, right? If the RP is higher as a result of a higher intensity, those are going to correlate pretty well. Whereas for velocity, if the velocity goes down, meaning we're not able to move it as fast, it's going to be more difficult, so the RP rating is going to go up. A few ways to apply RPE in training could be for the barbell back squat, we're supposed to squat 4 sets of 8 at 70% 1RM. And we could set guidelines to where if any set produces an RP greater than 7.5, we decrease load. If any set produces an RP less than 6, we increase the load. Another way could be if we have to squat 4 sets of 8 and choose a load that would have an RP fall within a range of 7.5 to 8.5. And if 300 pounds produces an RP of 7, we increase the load. If 300 pounds produces an RP of 9, we decrease the load. So we could set a goal RP range of 8 to 9, and if our RP for our first set, let's say, is 6, what should we do to the weight for our next set? And we could increase, maintain, or decrease weight, and we should increase the weight, therefore making it more difficult and making us more likely to get into our goal 8 to 9 RP range. I hope you've enjoyed this presentation and now understand the basics of periodization, as well as the basics of autoregulation using the RPE scale. Thank you.